I'm getting a lot better upload speed right now. I just had to reset my router and stuff. Sorry about that, guys. I don't see anybody watching. We got 2 watchers on YouTube. All right, so I'm gonna wait till we're back up to 8 or 9 people watching. Lucas is in. We're still at 2 people on YouTube. Well, regardless, this is going to be recorded. It's going to be a recorded session. It's going to be in our trading library for you guys to access at any time. And one thing, I really wanted to highlight is the DMI. I secured a really awesome entry on BTC yesterday using that and compounding it with a falling wedge. And I waited for just the right exact moment to enter my trade, and it really paid off, right? I did it on margin. So to set up our DMI, you're just going to go into your indicators and type in DMI, which is a directional movement. And what it is, it's a directional movement index. And the index contains a set of 3 momentum oscillators. They're not quite like a normal oscillator like an RSI, which is going to go into overbought, oversold. What they do is they're more of like a directional indicator as opposed to an oscillator. Sorry. And what these directional indicators do is they show us how much stronger a trend is, or the direction that the chart is headed is, and how much weaker it is. And then we can also spot divergences on it. And that's what I was waiting for last night before I made my entry. Now that I've got my DMI deployed, right, it's on the chart. I'm going to go into the format tab, the little gearbox. Here we've got 3 lines, a DI positive, a DI negative, and an ADX. I'm going to go ahead and make them darker, or wider, so they're more visible. I'm going to make this one a light blue. And this should give us a better idea of what's happening since they're a little more visible on the chart. So the red line being our ADX, the orange ones are DI negative, and the blue one is going to be our DI minus. Depending on the time frame that we're observing the chart on, these are going to vary. So a 1 hour time frame is going to look a lot different than a 1 day time frame, and same thing for a 5 minute to a 4 hour. But with trading, one thing we know, it's all about the time frame of the trade. I opened the position at 78.70 and closed it out at like 82.50, and I closed it out on a divergence. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to the time frame that I saw this developing on. Well, actually, we can kind of start with just the ADX for now, and I'm gonna go ahead and make the other lines less visible. So we're looking at just one line, and the ADX is going to be our average directional index. And what that does, it measures a trend. An ADX is going to have 2 key moments to let us know what's happening with a trend. There are peaks and there are troughs. A peak is going to be the top of the ADX, which is going to be right here and right there. And the trough is going to be the bottom. And these are the technical names for these positions. The higher the ADX, the weaker the trend is getting. So if you've got a really high ADX, what that lets us know is whether we're in an uptrend or a downtrend, that downtrend or that trend itself is getting weaker. And that's pertaining to that exact time frame. It's not going to be getting weaker forever, but that's for that time frame. And because it doesn't oscillate with the chart, it could be at a peak at a top and it could be at a peak at the bottom. So it's all about whether it's at a peak at a trough, or sorry, whether it's at a peak or at a trough, and not the in-betweens. Those are going to be the main pivot points that are going to signal, hey, this thing's about to turn around. I'm gonna go ahead and go on a bigger time frame to kind of show you guys a general idea. There's gonna be less peaks and less troughs. So I'm gonna go to a 4 hour time frame. As we can see here, every time the ADX reaches a peak or a trough, there's gonna be a change in direction. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put some vertical lines here and highlight some peaks, and then we'll look at some troughs. So we see a peak here. I'm gonna go ahead and put that red line and split it. Maybe change it to cyan, and that coincides with this exact moment on the chart. We see another peak here, and that coincides with that bottom on that chart. Now, whenever we're looking at an oscillator and we see a divergence, we're looking for a difference in price, right? And a difference in the level of that indicator, as in how high that indicator is and how it's relating to that chart. And here, whenever, on this previous really low dip, but whenever we hit that 5800 range, let me get rid of my volume. When we hit that 5800 range, based off this previous ADX peak, which is higher than this peak, we see an ADX divergence. And so I'm going to make this line yellow, my next one, the divergence lines. And we see a lower low in price. And then had this trend remained intact, right? Had this trend not gotten weaker, we would see a higher peak on the ADX. That means that downtrend is continuing. So here we see a divergence in ADX and a divergence in price. So that by itself should be somewhat of a telltale signal saying that there's going to be a switch in momentum. The direction of this trend is showing some divergences. And if we were to look at it over here as well, we see the opposite. We see a higher high in price, and we see the trend getting weaker as well. Does that make sense, guys? For the ADX portion of it? No? So peak was lower, meaning stronger, not weaker, but it's a peak. What happens at a peak? At a peak, we get a reversal. There are peaks and there are troughs, and that's where your reversals are going to happen. This was another peak, and the ADX came back down. The directional index is going to, it's more of a momentum oscillator. So a momentum directional indicator, where if momentum is continuing, that trend, or the ADX is going to continue with it. But as the ADX turns around and shows a peak, that means that trend is changing. It's going to be reversing. And just like I was talking about the peaks, there are also going to be the troughs or the bottoms. Here, we'd seen BTC make, I'll cover this next peak, and then I'll go in a shorter time frame. So we had a lower high on the ADX, on a higher high on the chart, and what happened with the peak? It broke back down, right? But then as we approach the top on this next peak, and there was somewhat of a divergence here as well, where we see a lower low. Actually, it's not quite a divergence, and another low on the ADX, and then that downtrend reaccelerated. So it's not, the ADX isn't gonna judge the trend, but where the trend might reverse, where the direction might reverse. Here would be another trough, or here would be a trough, but then the downtrend continued. So whether the ADX is moving up or down, it's not gonna let us know which way the trend is headed, just the how strong in that direction the trend is. When I get into the smaller time frame, you'll be able to really catch on, Watchmen. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to a 10-minute time frame. And here we've got various peaks and various troughs. I'm just going to go ahead and draw some lines on my peaks so we can see what's happening at these peaks. So here would be one peak. Here would be another peak. Here's a trough. Now, when a token is in range, the ADX is not going to be very relevant. It's really going to be relevant whenever we're in a breakout, whether we're going up or we're headed down. Whenever a chart is range trading, the ADX is not very relevant. But if we were to try to assess this current move here, we were somewhat of in a downtrend, right? But if we look at the ADX, it's headed down into a trough. So we might experience another reversal based on the strength of this trend. Now, this is a 3-in-1 indicator, so instead of just relying on the ADX, we're going to bring in DI plus and DI minus to help us judge the chart and read the chart. So I'm going to go ahead and make those lines brighter, and I'm going to change my ADX from a line into a histogram. And I'm going to make it a lot more faded, and we'll put it at green. Probably change this to green. Now, looking at this, the indicator just now, we see a lot more happening than just by trying to judge with the ADX. We know that a directional movement index, the DMI's got a DI positive and a DI negative. The DI negative is going to represent how strong the selling is for that time period, or the negative movement of the chart, the negative price movement. And the DI positive is going to represent the positive. A really key thing to look for somewhat of a buy signal or a sell signal in ADX is going to be a DI plus cross over DI minus, where DI positive crosses above DI negative, and we really want to see this happen at a peak and at a trough. So if we're at the top of a peak and this happens, that's a great it's going to be a great potential for a reversal. And same thing if we were at a trough. So let's look for some crossovers. Here we've got ADX bottoming out, right? It's right at like a 17. The ADX comes down and holds at 17. And then what happens? There's a DI negative cross and it goes all the way up. As soon as it crosses DI plus and goes above it, and we're at a directional reversal point for the trend, this should be a very strong sell signal. it coincides with several other factors. We've got one, the ADX is at a bottom, the DI negative goes above DI plus, and even though BTC was shaping up in a bull flag, which is a really bullish formation, once we see this cross happens, that should let us know that this is probably time to sell. Are you guys with me? Watchmen, any questions? Are you guys confused? Yep, and that's one thing to look for. Now, based on your time frame, you're gonna see that cross happen either before the reversal or at the reversal. But one thing to really home in on is going to be at what ADX level we're seeing this crossover try to happen, and are we in a range? Right here, we were in a somewhat of a breakout, and it got stronger on as far as ADX can tell, and then had the breakout continued, the ADX would have risen up with it, but it didn't. And another thing we can judge the strength of a trend on using this indicator is going to be DI minus divergences, and DI plus divergences. I will get into that later. I'm gonna spot another reversal point that should let us know, hey, it's time. You know, it's almost time for a reversal, and this would be around here. We see the ADX. We're coming off. We're going into a negative breakout, right? And the trend gets strong, and we see a peak. We go somewhat into a reversal, and then we start range trading, right? BTC enters a range at this point. And what are we going to see in these ranges? We're going to see a lot of crossovers. And these are not going to give us strong trading signals. And the ADX is actually laying flat. But then as the ADX got up and increased into the 24-25 range, a 24 to 26 range on an ADX is going to be the strongest point to a rally, whether we're rallying up or we're rallying down. And in this being at a 24 with a DI positive cross, this should be an absolute buy signal, because one, our ADX is at 24. We're going up into somewhat of an uptrend out of a range where it was laying flat, and we have this strong crossover. You guys still with me? Any questions so far on this signal? You want me to find another one that's similar? ADX high, whenever the ADX gets to its highest point. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and scrap the DMI. I'm just going to put a regular ADX to show you guys what that looks like. There are two key areas for an ADX. The top and the bottom. The peak and the trough. Right? An ADX of 24, that means that trend is very much likely to accelerate, especially if the ADX is headed up. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take a flat bar and lay it down at the 24 level on an ADX. What do we see here? We see the ADX cross 24 and keep going up, and that downtrend really accelerated. maybe shift it over. Well, actually, that's right at the 24 mark on our ADX. So as ADX crosses 24, we're gonna see a trend acceleration, whether we're headed up or down. Now that 24 is going to be tricky because it's not going to be a 24 on every time frame. Now when I'm entering a long-term holding like an altcoin that's in an uptrend, I'll look at it on a 12-hour or 1-day chart, and if the ADX is at 24, that means we're going to experience a rally. Here's another ADX 24 on the way up. That just one's on the way down. And we see the downtrend continue, right? We see a steep drop in price. Where's my 24 on the way up? This is a 24 on the way up. And then what happened? The ADX, the average directional index, comes down and turns back around at 24 once again to a lower peak. But as this trend tried to pick up more steam, the peaks were getting lower and lower. If we were to look at BTC on a longer time frame, if we were to look at it on a 1-day chart, we see the ADX really continuously go up, right? So the ADX can get pretty high, and we want to see it making these higher highs if on a true breakout. That's going from, you know, the last trough, the last bottom was 14. That's going from 4,000 all the way up to 20,000, right? We had a couple of peaks, but this peak was higher than that one, and then the final peak was the highest. So the levels relevant at what time frames? The three really crucial levels to pay attention to are going to be an ADX 24, an ADX top, and ADX bottom. As far as an ADX goes. So the three crucial parts of an ADX, let's see if we can pop an X or something. Gonna be your top, your bottoms, and 24, the green line I have across. I'm gonna go ahead and go back to the DMI and cover DI. Any more questions on the ADX, guys? Awesome. So back to our Directional Movement Index. DI plus, DI minus. And we'll keep the ADX there. Now last night, as this move was developing, it was around midnight my time. What I did is I noticed my falling wedge, which is going to be a breakout pattern. And I actually didn't trade it until about 3 a.m. So from midnight to 3 a.m. I kind of took a little nap, and then my dog wakes me up right at 3 a.m. for this little beauty of an entry. And what I saw here was several things. One, we're making lower lows on the chart, but the DI negative is actually slowing down. What we're seeing here is we're seeing lower and lower peaks on our negative directional index. So what that tells us is that the negative direction, the selling of BTC was slowing down as we were making these lower lows. As well as where the ADX isn't being very consistent. It's not consistently going up. I saw a top over here. Well, that was going to be our reversal to go up. And then there was a trough, right? And then another peak. The next peak was up here. And instead of the downtrend continuing and the ADX showing continuation, there was another somewhat of a reversal here happening because there was a peak. We go down in a trough into the next peak. And this right here, this was the most crucial element. This is exactly where I entered the chart. And that was at a 16 level of ADX. We have a DI positive crossover DI minus. And what do we see on the chart? Watchmen, I know you've heard me talk about this a lot. The retest of a falling wedge. So we've got the falling wedge. It breaks upwards. We retest it. I didn't enter just yet. I waited to get a little bit further continuation, further confirmation. And my confirmations were this. We've got an ADX trough, right? We've got an absolute low on the ADX. While this trend is reversing, we have DI negative, divergent from price. These things, as price comes down, we want to see DI negative go up higher. The higher DI negative goes, it means the stronger the selling is. Look at this. We've got lower lows and we've got higher highs. This is going to indicate that the short selling or the price action is going further down because we're getting a lot more selling pressure. Any questions so far? The other crossings, are you talking about these right here? So how do we know to ignore them? Well, are we at a peak or at a trough? And what else is on the chart? You're talking about this crossing and this crossing, correct? Give me a full sentence. Give me a full paragraph. The two prior the wedge. Well, you could have traded those, but they're a really risky entry. This is a really risky entry with somewhat of a no confirmation. So if we didn't have a falling wedge and we're in this downtrend, we still don't have midnight. These two guys right here. Is that what you're talking about? Okay. So we do have a falling wedge, right? And we broke out of the wedge. What happened once BTC broke out of the wedge? What's our playbook say on wedges? There's always going to be a retest of the falling wedge. Now, you could have gone in over here, but that's going to be a risky entry. The first person to get into a trade is going to get stopped out. And the second person to get into a trade is very likely to get stopped out. Once we get that confirmation, how would you ignore these crosses? Well, where's the ADX? ADX is still descending. It hasn't turned around. There was no turn. We're still coming down, but it's not at bottom. Does that answer your question, Watchman? Could I see a bottom of an ADX when I entered? Realistically speaking, I could not see the actual bottom of the ADX when I entered, but I saw several things. I saw that the ADX was getting lower towards where it typically bottoms at. My second somewhat of a confirmation was we broke out of a falling wedge. We tested the falling wedge, and I got in at 78.70. So I got in right here on this candle. So at this point, yes, I could actually see the ADX turn around. And it was very much of a timely entry. If I was to match that with my candle, let me make this line a little lighter. Let's go yellow and much thinner. This is what I saw. I saw the ADX curve up. I saw DI positive cross above DI minus on the retest of a falling wedge. Like this is a gift of an entry. This is timing a breakout and getting in right when we get that confirmation. I know you were with us in the chat room and we were talking about Sneaker Boy and I were in a short position. I used the 5-minute chart to see this. I was just keeping track of it with the 1 minute. I know that you were in the chat room when Sneaker Boy and I were talking about how we were in the short and then we saw a falling wedge and we didn't close it fast enough on the retest and open our long, and then we were forced to take a lot less profits from our short. But had we closed our short on the retest of a falling wedge. So this is, if we were to have a short long playbook, a long entry in a downtrend that's going to be the least risky is going to be on the retest of the falling wedge. And if somebody wanted to get further confirmation, aside from divergences, because the momentum oscillators like stochastics and RSIs aren't making much sense right now, this would be a 3-in-1 indicator to let us know what's happening and what's a good entry. I knew you'd catch on, man. That's awesome. Next up, I closed my 50x margin position pretty early on because I made about 238%. And where did I close it and why did I close it? I closed it, one, because I wanted to go to bed, and two, because I made 238% in a matter of, I'll put the time and date. In under an hour. 12 bars, 1 hour. And I closed it right in this range, right? I closed it on this second high. And what made me close it on that second high? Well, I'm just going to leave all that there. There was somewhat of a divergence. We've got a higher high in the price action. And I've got a lower high on the DI positive. DI positive is going to represent the buying pressure, the bulls in the market, and the bullish momentum. If I'm in a long position on a margin trade, I just made a good 23%. I don't want to spend all day watching my screen or set a stop loss. I'm happy with my position. I could have profit taken the first time, but my ADX was still going up, so there's no reason to do so. And what happened next was there was a divergence. I saw a higher high on the price on the chart, but I saw a lower high on DI positive. And what that tells me is that the bullish momentum is slowing down. The positive direction of this price action was starting to taper off. Now, I could have held through until now, but we've been seeing all these dumps, and that would have been pretty risky to get stopped out or liquidated, or even for BTC to dump again. So I actually profit took right here and then opened, I think, a 10x leverage position up here for a longer long, because it was just too good right there of an entry. And I'm probably back at zero here, but my liquidation on that one was 7,400, so I don't think I'm going to get liquidated. So I opened my second long, same position I started with, same amount of BTC value, but at a much lower leverage, just so I can ride it for further continuation. So instead of just fully exiting, I somewhat have downsized my position and took my profits. Now, when it comes to DI positive and DI negative divergences, I like to judge them based on that current run, right? So once we have a crossover, it's almost like a start over. It's like a blank canvas in a sense. And what are we seeing here, guys? We're seeing the ADX turn back around. We're seeing a trough. We see DI plus pick up. Price action increase. And where was our last peak? That was our last peak. So to sum it up, right? We can't just strictly trade on an ADX, but we can use it in these pullbacks to help us assess and get a real confirmation of should I enter this trade or not. And in yesterday's scenario, it seemed like the only real indicator that would provide me with enough confidence to place a 50x trade with a liquidation under $100 from my entry when we've been doing these violent swings. And had I just done that on the rising wedge, that would have been good, but I wouldn't have had as much confirmation, and confidence would have probably cashed out sooner. So I really wanted to highlight, the ADX and its uses, especially whenever we're in this chop, because our momentum oscillators, RSIs, and stochastics, they're not going to move as well with the chart. You guys have questions? Anything you want me to go over pertaining to DMI, DI plus, DI minus, and ADXs? Yes, and that's why I really wanted to bring this to you guys' attention, because when compared to other indicators, we're not going to be able to assess the trend based on an RSI, but this is a 30-minute time frame. Remember when I was talking about ADX peaks and troughs? And you said, well, it's headed back down, so it's getting stronger. What do we see here? We see a lower ADX peak on a lower price. Had this downtrend been getting stronger, our ADX would go through the roof. Or had it been a continuation and not a reversal. we've seen ADX as high as 54 on this downtrend. In here, we had it come up to 50 and slow down right at my reversal point, maybe like and 3 hours before I got in, go from 50 to 49 or so, 51 to 49, and then come back down. Now, judging on this, if we get an ADX turn on 24, right now we're at 19. If ADX can manage to turn and hit 24 instead of keep coming down with a DI plus crossing above DI minus, that would be a great next place for me to either add to my long or start considering, essentially add to my long. It's not going to predict what's going to happen in the future, but it's going to give us a real-time assessment of the direction of what's going on. Oh, sorry guys. Is that better? So we've got a lower ADX peak on a lower low. So that's going to give us a reversal point. And as we come down, we had a DI plus cross above DI minus. And then here we're seeing a lower low than we were seeing up there. But DI minus is coming down and DI positive is going back up. Now, as I was saying, if this ADX comes down and gets buried in a trough, BTC's in trouble again. That means this uptrend's not going to continue. If this ADX level goes down to this is a 12 ADX and this is a 10 ADX. If we can get it to turn around over here and head back up and get to that 24-25 mark with a DI positive cross, it is time to go long until we see another ADX breakdown, until we see another ADX peak. I know it seemed like a little messy at first with the ADX, but then once I brought it all in together, I think you guys get it now. Absolutely. And that's the thing, volatility creates opportunity. We can't really time it. I mean, we could, but these time frames are weird where we're seeing these, steep drops. And I'm going to give you my honest opinion on these big red candles. It appears to be somewhat of somebody's dumping thousands and thousands of coins to bring the price down. This isn't going to be like natural profit taking or anything of that sort. This is somebody with big bags either dumping the price down or short selling really heavily. I'll be honest with you, I opened my 10x long here with a lick at 74 and I haven't even checked my BitMEX today. This is like an attempt to do a transfer of wealth, right? And it's only going to be sustainable for so long. ADX is at 17. So, this is this peak going up. We want to see it turn. If it doesn't turn around to represent this uptrend, then this real uptrend is getting really weak and we're going to experience a sell-off. So, that's when I'll go out on like a shorter time frame and see what's really happening. And we see a trough here, and then it's tricky. Now we're range trading. We can't really use this in a range. Any further questions, guys? Awesome. Well, this is going to be cataloged in the trading library tomorrow. I'm going to cover bar formation. So we're going to do pennants, neutral pennants, bullish pennants, bearish pennants. We're going to do head and shoulders, inverse head and shoulders, rising wedges, falling wedges, and diamonds. And then you guys will be able to compile these together with the indicators that you're picking up, so you can really make the best decisions. Lucas, I believe it's in announcements. Did I not announce it? I did not announce it. I'll go ahead and I'll post the time shortly. I gotta check my calendar real quick, and I'll post the time shortly. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I'll catch you guys on Discord. It looks like we're somewhat headed back up. We see DI positive heading back up. And our ADX is at 21, so we want to look out for that 24, which is right there. If we can cross this 24, then we can essentially deduct that we are headed up. So, thank you guys for being with us. Thanks for tuning in. I know this is crypto level hell, but I'm trying to shed as much light as I can to help you guys navigate the market. I'll catch you guys on Discord. Thank you.